Let's talk about what they are actually hiding in Ukraine. So the New York Times, with this bombshell story last night, right during our broadcast, and we brought it to you then, but we wanted to dive more deeply into it with some context today. So here is the cover story of this New York Times piece. U.S. lacks a clear picture of Ukraine's war strategy, officials say. Now, this thing goes deep.
Right. So U.S. military officials spoke to the New York Times and said that they are trying to get an accounting for where the weapons are going, what the plan is, right? What is the military strategy? What are the asset numbers, right? Who is still fighting? Where are they? Because as Ukraine continues to plead for more weapons, the United States would like to know, well, what's the lay of the land right now, right? And we are told by this article that they really are not able to get information. Ukraine is being especially cagey about it. And they're saying they're having to rely on other countries that are present in the region for intelligence. I love the line that says they really don't want to resort to spying to Ukraine. Like, we're really trying not to. This is how I am with like my kids and their text messages. Like, I'm not going to read them, but if you're being cagey about it, I'm going to have to resort to reading them, right? This is the way that they're saying, but we're trying not to spy on you, but we're getting so little information, we might just.
Yeah, but come on, that's a giant load of horse shit, because I think everyone watching right now, how many of, just in the chat, just let us know in the comments, how many of you think right now that the United States isn't actively spying on the Ukrainians as it is? Like, we run the show. We installed a puppet regime in 2014 as their government.
I wouldn't say it's spying so much as, like, it is very much actually the analogy that I just gave you about reading my children's social media and texts and things like that is like very much the same. It's like, I really control it.
I really control everything.
I have the right to read their texts. I try not to, but if I feel like I need to, I've let them know this many times. I don't know if this is the same, but it's the same.
That's a private family, right? You're not bringing about the surveillance state,
right?
But I should retain the right to if I pay the data plan, right? That's sort of the analogy that I'm making, is that the United States has been in control so much in Ukraine, so they kind of. Right.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I just saw a thing yesterday. It's funny you brought that up, that they were showing how a lot of the positions of the Russian soldiers were revealed through camera traps and surveillance traps. So yeah, they have them. And of course they're paid for by the US.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Tara Reid has a great podcast where she talks about, and in one of her most recent episodes, if you go over her Substack, we'll have it linked up in the show below in the show description, the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. So it absolutely is, Tara, a proxy war, right? And when you have a proxy war, as the New York Times points out in this piece, governments often withhold information from the public for operational security. But these information gaps within the U.S. government could make it more difficult for the Biden administration to decide how to target military aid as it sends billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine.
I mean, this is a trust but verify situation, right? Because we've committed so much money and weaponry to be sent over there, and we're taking their word for it, right? And their word is so much largely dependent on Zelensky's sort of media brand. Do you want to ring in on that, Tara, at all?
Yeah. I mean, like what you're seeing. I mean, remember, let's go back to Edward Snowden. He warned us about this. He warned us about the imperialism and the American government not only putting surveillance on its own citizens, but around the world, and just thinking that it has the right to do so. And the problem with that, for instance, with the proxy war that the U.S. and NATO is fighting against Russia, using Ukraine as, basically cannon fodder. The problem with that is that the Ukrainians are completely dependent on the money, right? So they're trying to get more money and more support. And to do that, they're going to lie. They're going to, spread propaganda. They're going to do anything. And I think later on the show, you'll talk about that portion of it. But back to the surveillance, how many times have we done regime changes around the world, like that later we find out about? The taxpayers are funding, there's manufactured consent, or we don't know about it as citizens at all in European or U.S. countries, and we're doing regime change like in the global South, and and so this is just sort of par for the course. I mean, they've put $53 billion towards this weaponry in Ukraine. So yeah, they're going to watch what's happening.
My favorite part of this piece, this is a favorite. The result, former officials said, has been some blind spots. This is how the New York Times puts some blind spots. Here's how the New York Times puts it. And then I love this quote from Beth Sanner. And maybe Tara, maybe you know Beth from having worked for Biden. Anyway, Beth says, "How much do we really know about how Ukraine is doing?" A former senior intelligence official, Beth Sanner, says, "Can you find a person who will tell you with confidence how many troops has Ukraine lost? How many pieces of equipment has Ukraine lost?" I can't believe the New York Times actually has her on, well, this is a former senior intelligence official, but on the record saying you can't find anybody. Good luck finding anybody that actually knows what the hell Ukraine is doing with our money and our weapons and how many troops they've lost, because we've heard a lot of bullshit numbers coming out of Zelensky's regime, right?
Right. But sorry, go ahead.
I just said right. Go ahead.
Good point. But these are indicative of this type of narrative shift that we have not seen up until now, because all of this coverage has been scrappy Ukraine is going to win. The United States doing victory laps for all of its sort of white savior, right? That like, yay, we're saving these people. We're sending them money. We can do this. And now we're seeing the mainstream media sort of admit that this may not be a winning battle, that the West can win by means of the way that it's been defined, right? A win, which in fact, even in the article, it points out that they're not even sure what win means anymore.
Well,
yeah,
and
go ahead.
Your earlier point about not knowing what's going on, or kind of this, let's say it's cognitive dissonance, right? Two things at once. They're saying that there's some surveillance, but yet they don't know what's going on, et cetera. Well, Zelensky, if you recall a few months ago, they kicked out all the media. There's an unbalanced view of what's happening. And that's part of the problem. They, they've either been jailed or they've been, expelled. And so they're not wanting to really cover what is actually happening. And I think they're concealing a lot of it. And they're also concealing what they're doing to, as far as war crimes, what they, like what's happening in the Donbass region. They don't want that there, because then they'll lose support. And those virtue signals of yellow and blue flags all over social media you see are going to disappear when people start seeing the atrocities for real.
I got to ask you, I want to play this soundbite, but then Tara, I want to get your perspective. You worked for Biden. You worked for Senator Biden, who of course has absolutely supported wars endlessly for many, many years. I want to play this soundbite though this is an example of the ridiculousness of the scenario right now. The New York Times is reporting that we don't know where this money is going. They're lying to us in Ukraine. They won't actually tell us where this money is going, where the weapons are, how many troops they've lost. But this is the type of crap that you see on mainstream television. This is Dan Hoffman, ex-CIA agent, who was on Fox and had this to say about continuing to funnel weapons to Ukraine. Listen.
What do you make of this? Do we need to give more weapons?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. We've got to keep Ukraine in the fight. Vladimir Putin is trying to leverage every bit of pressure he can on Ukraine and on the West. He's using food, weaponizing food to try to induce the West to reduce our support to Ukraine. But we've got to keep Ukraine in the fight. That's the only way that we can reach a resolution that protects not only Ukraine, but our NATO allies, especially on the borders of Russia.
So we don't know where the money's going. We don't know where the weapons are, but we got to keep sending more of them to keep them in the fight. Tara,
because of food.
Right. Because of food. Tara, you work for Biden. How much longer can his administration continue to go with this and continue to funnel weapons and money into this region? Does he have like an endless appetite for this? What is your perspective on that?
Well, it's a couple of things. I was there in the early 90s, and when I was a staffer there, I was also an intern for Leon Panetta. And what I saw, and during that time, it was just on the heels of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and there were discussions about Soviet Union's transition, and became Russia and so on. And as many people know, America was pretty much robbing the coffers of Russia until they got a leader who pushed back on that. But what I noticed was the Russophobia was already present there. They used to say things like they would never have a seat at the table, and they meant it. And this is one example. This proxy war that they're fighting against Russia, with the Ukraine. It started with 2014 with Maidan, right?
Right.
When the Western-backed coup. So this has gone on for a while. Biden has been historically for every single conflict that's come up that he's been able to vote on. Now they don't even bother voting. I think the only person that really gave, some sort of impassioned speech against getting into this conflict against Russia was Ron Paul. When he asked the question that you're asking, where is this money going? Where are the weapons going? And I think it was only 22 Republicans voted against the $40 billion going to Ukraine. The rest of the members of Congress voted for this. And so historically, I saw that over and over again, that appetite for imperialism and war. And it was, it was really stunning, actually, because I feel like the military industrial complex has just kind of taken over the country.
Well, and the Democratic Party. I just want to kind of follow up on that because working for Biden, you were there in the 90s.
Yeah.
Think about the squad. Every Democrat, it makes me sick as a progressive. Every member of the squad, all of them fell in lockstep and voted for this thing, voted for this $40 billion, this additional money to flow there.
Including Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, including Bernie Sanders. Does that make your heart hurt a little bit thinking about your history working in the Democratic Party?
I have no feeling about it one way or another anymore. I'm like beyond. For me, democracy died in '93. It's just it's like we've just moved into this. Like I said, military-industrial complex is winning. It's the United States of Raytheon, all right? The weapons manufacturer.
Yeah.
That's
I
where
hope
we are.
I can get there to that. I have no feeling about it. Like you're like a political Zen master.
I don't mean to sound dramatic, but it actually is really heartbreaking. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican anymore. I'm independent. And I've even lost kind of hope with some of the electoral, voting, just because it just seems like we're just going in a circle, and that the two parties have merged into one. And actually, what was the neocons of the past are the neoliberals now. They're all hawks. They're all interested in regime changes and war. And think about what that $53 billion could have done for our infrastructure, for American citizens.
Yes.
How that could have been used.
Well, 22 billion of it we know from, I don't know where the study was. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. But it was like 22 billion could literally eradicate all poverty and hunger, poverty in the United States. 22 billion in the United States. We just sent 53 billion to Ukraine. But
yes.
We got priorities.
And we don't know what the payoff of that will be. And I do feel like now that the Western media is starting to admit that this conflict may not go well and is not going to be this like scrappy Ukrainian victory that they had promised us with all of these stories, they're now telling us that it will hurt us because there will be food shortages, right? Because Ukraine cannot export all of these wheat products that it normally does. Although, again, I remind you that on the State Department's list of sanctions, it did point out that the sanctions against Russia must not affect food supplies or agriculture. So anything that's there, anything that's in Russia should still be getting through without punishment of sanctions. And Ukraine is just not going to, but the spring planting really didn't happen in so much of the region because of war, so that they can't export what they don't have. So we're being told, hey, this may not be going well, and that means you won't have food, so don't blame us for inflation, right? So this media cycle is turning for us to maybe not champion war as much as like accept our own fate. And that seems to me just very deflating.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised that we had this New York Times piece, I'll be honest with you. 2 New York Times pieces, which, I'm no fan of the New York Times, but 2 New York Times pieces in the past few days about like trouble in Ukraine. And they're lying to us, essentially. We don't know what's going on because they won't tell us. And we're sending billions of dollars to them. So, hey, give credit where credit's due. The New York Times does a lot of crap. They do a lot of bad. But when,
you know what it is, though? I think that they're just getting ready to throw them under the bus. Remember what happened with Cuomo, right? With who? When they were ready to get rid of Cuomo and throw him under the bus. All of a sudden, they started, the media started on the attack. This is very pointed and because we're getting ready for the fall elections, right? They know it's going to be a bloodbath for Democrats. You'll notice that they are, the yellow and blue flag and all that virtue signaling is kind of getting dimmer and dimmer because people are really hurting. I mean, $7, $8, $9 a gallon for gas and not being able. 45% of families right now since the pandemic can't afford enough food to feed their children and themselves. So adults are going without food. That's 45% of America right now.
Wow.
Oh my God. You're up in Washington. You're in the Pacific Northwest. What are gas prices like where you are?
Close to, they're getting up $6, $7 a gallon. And then down in Los Angeles, where some of my friends are, they're getting close to $10 a gallon. Right now they're $8
a gallon.
$8 or $9. Yeah. And I mean, think about the minimum wage is less than $15 an hour. So you're basically, you're just going to pay to go to work.
1 gallon of gas with 1 hour of work. I wonder if the New York Times starts to drag Biden under because, he was just not Trump. So that's why he needed to be elevated during the election and since. But if he falls out of favor, maybe they drag you out and you get this mea culpa that you never really
do you think the New York Times is going to apologize to you? Do you think you'll ever get that?
Are you waiting?
Actually, I'm in a federal lawsuit with them right now, so I doubt it. I sued them because they printed my social security number. They printed my congressional badge and had my social security number. And in the article, they gave my mother's maiden name and they had my name. So it was like, I immediately it caused a lot of problems for me.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
And I can talk about the lawsuit openly. It's not a big deal. It's a very straightforward, it's just privacy violation. But the New York Times has a history of being very corrupt with its stories. I mean, look what it's doing with Ukraine. Look at how many stories they told, like Snake Island, where it wasn't true. They said soldiers were murdered, they weren't. And instead of retracting, they issued a story that, well, they know some of the stories coming out of the Ukraine are false, but it lifted morale.
Right. It was a morale lifting story. Yeah. So, that's how we label it now. Instead of propaganda, we're just saying, but it was good for even like the ghost of Kiev, right? The pilot who was shooting down all of those Russian planes.
It was an archetype.
Which was not real. It's like Snoopy, the Red Baron. It didn't actually exist. It was totally fake news. But now it's just a morale booster, says that. Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah, this is what we've got. This is what we've got now from our mainstream media. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.